The words landed in the middle of a quiet Sunday afternoon, slicing through the clink of teacups and the hum of the ceiling fan. I froze, my spoon halfway to my mouth, a curl of steam ghosting up from my coffee. Across the table, my father didn't look up. He just kept stirring his tea, slow circles as if buying time. Or hiding something. Forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I felt the floor shift beneath me. Not in the way earthquakes do, sudden and loud, but like a slow, invisible sinkhole, swallowing the air, the walls, the trust I'd thought was solid. My aunt's eyes darted toward my father. His didn't move. Our house had always been quiet in the afternoons, the kind of quiet that wasn't peace so much as an unspoken agreement to avoid each other's shadows. The sunlight would drift in through the lace curtains, scattering fractured patterns across the tiled floor. My father liked the house dim, said too much light made the place feel exposed, like strangers could see right into our lives. I grew up learning to move softly in that dimness, not tiptoeing exactly, but careful, like the walls were made of paper, and any sudden movement might tear them. My sister Maya never seemed to notice. She would hum to herself in the kitchen, tap her fingers on the counter, leave cupboard doors hanging open. She had a way of bringing noise and air into the room, and my father tolerated it. That Sunday had been no different, at least not until my aunt arrived. She was my father's younger sister, the kind of woman who always wore too much perfume and never came without a story to tell. I'd grown used to her sharp tongue, her gossip disguised as concern. But that day, there was something else in her voice, something brittle. We were halfway through tea when she said it. The sentence that snapped the thread of my life in half. I remember staring at her chipped coral nail polish, the way she gripped her teacup too tightly. I wanted to believe she'd made a mistake, that her words had slipped out wrong, but she didn't flinch. My father didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it either. His silence pressed into me like a hand on the back of my neck, guiding me to say nothing. And I didn't. Not then. Instead, I excused myself and walked to my room, feeling the weight of their eyes follow me. Maya's laughter drifted in from the backyard. She was on the phone, telling someone about a new job interview. Her voice was bright, unshaken, as if the world hadn't just tilted. I leaned against my bedroom door and listened. She'd always been my anchor. Older by 2 years, but never the kind to pull rank. We'd shared everything. Midnight snacks, whispered confessions, the soft, silly kind of sister fights that ended in giggles. The idea that she might not be my real sister, whatever that meant, wasn't just absurd. It was dangerous. Dangerous to the version of my life I'd built in my head. Dangerous to the trust I'd put in the people who raised me. I told myself it was nothing. That my aunt had a knack for twisting truths until they sounded like secrets. But that night, when I passed my father in the hallway, he avoided my gaze. And when I saw Maya in the kitchen, she smiled at me like she always did. But there was something in her eyes I'd never noticed before. A flicker. Like maybe she already knew. 2 days later, I found it. It wasn't a dramatic discovery. No hidden safe behind a painting. No dusty attic trunk. It was a plain white envelope, slipped between the pages of an old photo album on the living room shelf. I'd been looking for a picture from my school's annual day to send to a friend, flipping absent-mindedly through the album, when the envelope slid out and landed on the carpet. There was no name on it. No stamp. No postmark. Just a faint coffee stain on one corner and my father's handwriting across the flap. For I hesitated before opening it. My father wasn't the kind to leave things lying around. Everything had a place. Keys in the bowl by the door, bills in the wooden tray, on his desk. The fact that this was here, wedged carelessly into an album we rarely touched, made my chest tighten. Inside were 3 photographs and a folded letter. The photos were of Maya and me, only they weren't the kind of pictures we'd ever had in our house. One was of us as toddlers, sitting on a blanket in a park I didn't recognize. Another was from some kind of school event. Maya stood in the center, her hair in pigtails, smiling, while I was on the far edge of the frame, half-turned, away. The third was stranger. A hospital room. A woman I didn't know was holding Maya in her arms. I wasn't in that one at all. My throat went dry. I unfolded the letter. It wasn't long, just a few lines written in rushed, uneven script. For her sake, tell her when she's old enough. She deserves to know where she came from, and so does the other one. No names. No signature. I sat there on the carpet, the envelope trembling in my hands, and for the first time since my aunt's words, I felt it. The pull of a truth I wasn't ready to see. My first thought was to take it to Maya, to shove the photos in her hands and demand answers. But something stopped me, because if she didn't know, then I'd be the one putting the crack in her world. And if she did know, then she'd already chosen not to tell me. That night, I slipped the envelope under my bed. I told myself I'd think about it in the morning, that I'd find the right time to bring it up. But sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every shadow stretching across my wall felt like it was holding something back. The next morning, Maya didn't come down for breakfast. My father said she'd left early to take care of something. He didn't look at me when he said it, and for the first time I realized this might not just be a secret, it might be a secret they were actively protecting. Growing up, I learned that love in our house didn't flow evenly. It trickled, selectively, deliberately, pooling around certain people and leaving others dry. Maya was the golden child. She didn't try to be, at least not in the way some children do, scrambling for praise. It was more that the world seemed to tilt in her direction without her asking. Teachers adored her. Relatives commented on her grace, her smile, her good nature. My father would say things like, "You could learn from your sister," whenever I faltered. I wasn't bad, just different. More reserved, more skeptical. I didn't light up rooms the way she did. My achievements were noted, but rarely celebrated. A good grade earned a nod, a bad one, a lecture. And somewhere in between those nods and lectures, I learned that my role wasn't to shine. It was to stay out of the way. Our mother, when she was alive, tried to even the scales. She had this way of catching my eye during family gatherings, slipping me a smile that felt like a secret apology. But she was sick for much of my childhood, and when she passed away, the house lost whatever warmth she had managed to keep alive. After that, my father became the center of everything, and he made it clear, keeping the peace meant keeping quiet. Maya could slam the front door after curfew, and he'd sigh but say nothing. I could forget to replace the milk in the fridge, and I'd get an icy rundown of my responsibilities. It was never about the milk. It was about order, about control. I remember one winter evening when I was 14. Maya had been chosen to lead her school's annual function, and the whole family went to watch. I'd spent weeks rehearsing a small role in the same program, but when the curtain closed, every compliment, every photo request, every word of praise went to her. At home, my father put his hand on her shoulder and said, "You have your mother's light." He glanced at me briefly, then walked away. That night, I cried quietly in my room, not because I wanted what Maya had, but because I realized I could never have it. The subtle part of it all was that Maya wasn't cruel. She didn't flaunt her place in the family hierarchy. Sometimes she'd even try to pull me into her orbit, invite me to sit with her friends, share her clothes. But there was always a line she didn't cross, defending me when it mattered, like the time our aunt accused me of lying about losing money from my school allowance. I'd told the truth, but my father believed the aunt. Maya stood in the kitchen doorway silent, twisting a bracelet around her wrist. When I asked her later why she didn't speak up, she said, "It wouldn't have helped. You know how Dad gets." And that was the pattern. I absorbed the blame when something went wrong. Maya absorbed the praise when something went right. Somewhere, between those poles, I shrank into myself, learning the safety of invisibility. It wasn't until my mid-20s that I started building a life outside those walls. Friends who laughed too loud, a job that kept me away from home more than my father liked. Still, I came back on weekends, out of duty, out of habit, out of the belief that maybe one day things would be different. But sitting on my bedroom floor with that envelope under my bed, I realized something ugly. Maybe things had been different. All along, just not in the way I thought. What if my father's favoritism wasn't just about personality or appearance? What if it had roots in something deeper, in bloodlines, in history? The letter's words, "She deserves to know where she came from, and so does the other one," echoed in my head. The other one. The phrasing gnawed at me. It didn't say you both. It didn't say the girls. It divided us. I thought back to moments that never made sense. Why Maya's baby pictures started later than mine. Why our birth certificates were locked in a file cabinet my father never let me near. Why certain family members treated me with a cautious familiarity while treating her with almost ceremonial affection. Maybe I was imagining patterns that weren't there. Or maybe I'd been seeing them my whole life without knowing how to name them. The dread wasn't just about the truth. It was about what the truth might explain, and whether once I knew, I'd ever be able to unsee it. The next evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled the envelope from under my bed and spread its contents across my desk like puzzle pieces. The photographs stared back at me. Frozen. Moments from a story I didn't remember living. I studied the hospital photo again. The woman holding Maya wasn't my mother. She was younger, with dark, tired eyes and a nurse's badge pinned to her uniform. In the background, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A small whiteboard with a date scrawled on it, 3 weeks before the date on Maya's birth certificate. A knot tightened in my stomach. If Maya's birthday was wrong, it wasn't just a clerical error. Someone had changed it. I picked up my phone and opened an old group chat with cousins I rarely spoke to. Most of the time, they ignored me. Family politics had a way of trickling down to our generation. Still, I typed, "Do you remember who was there when Maya was born?" Only one cousin replied hours later, "Not really. I just know Aunt Rima disappeared for a while that year." Aunt Rima, my father's elder sister. I'd never thought much about her absence. She lived abroad, and whenever she visited, the air in the room grew heavier. She and my father were polite but distant, like two actors forced to share a scene. The next day, I found myself in the attic, climbing past boxes of old clothes and rusted tools. I told myself I was looking for more photo albums, but really, I was chasing a thread I couldn't stop pulling. That's when I found the tin box. It was tucked behind a stack of yellowed newspapers, small enough to fit in my hands. Inside were scraps of paper, old bills, postcards, and a folded birth announcement. The card was delicate, its ink faded, but the words were clear. "Welcome to the world, Maya Rima Kapoor." The date was the same as the one on the hospital whiteboard, not the one I'd grown up celebrating. And below that, in smaller print, proud parents, Rima, and the rest of the name had been torn away. I sat there, my breath shallow, the attic dust clinging to my skin. If the card was real and it looked real, then Maya wasn't my father's daughter at all. She was Aunt Rima's, which meant my father had been raising his sister's child and passing her off as his own. But why? That night, I couldn't meet Maya's eyes at dinner. She was chatting about something, new shoes maybe, but her voice felt far away. My father barely spoke, his gaze fixed on the TV. The air between us was thick with the weight of what I knew, and yet, I couldn't tell if Maya sensed it. The halfway shock wasn't just the truth about her parentage. It was the growing realization that my place in the family had been built on a lie. Not just favoritism, but deliberate reshaping of who we were to each other. And if my aunt had kept this secret for over 2 decades, what else had they all hidden? When I went to bed, I slid the tin box under my pillow. Not because I thought someone would take it, but because I needed it close, as if holding the truth might keep it from shifting again. I didn't plan the confrontation. It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to answer. The landline rang just after 9, late for us. My father had stepped outside to water the plants, so I picked it up. "Hello?" A pause. Then a woman's voice, low and urgent. "Is this Rhea?" "Yes." "Who's this?" "This is Rima, your aunt." The name hit me like a slap. I'd only seen her a handful of times, but her voice carried the same quiet authority I remembered, like she'd already decided how the conversation would go. "I heard you've been asking questions," she said. "About Maya." I gripped the receiver tighter. I found something. An old birth announcement. Why would it say you're her mother? A sigh. Because I am. The admission was so blunt it almost didn't feel real. My chest tightened. Then why? Because it was better this way, she cut in. For everyone. You don't understand the circumstances. Then make me understand, I snapped. There was a pause. Rhea, your father and I, we made choices to protect you both. You don't need to dig through the past. It won't help you, and it will hurt her. The way she said hurt her made my stomach twist. So you've been lying to her too? Another pause. Then, almost gently. You've always been the difficult one, haven't you? Always needing answers, even when the truth will only make things worse. Think about Maya. Think about what this would do to her image of herself, her life. Do you want to be responsible for breaking her? Her words slid under my skin like cold water. I could almost hear my father in her tone. Firm, controlled, dressed in the language of concern. I'm not the one who lied, I said quietly. No, she said. You're the one who can decide whether this family stays intact. Don't make this about your resentment toward your father. This is about your sister. The word sister felt deliberate. A reminder of the role I was expected to keep playing. Before I could respond, my father walked in, his hands damp from the garden. His eyes narrowed when he saw me holding the phone. He took it from my hand with a swift, practiced motion. Rima, he said flatly. Then, after a pause, I'll handle it. He hung up without another word and turned to me. You don't answer calls from her, ever. Why? I demanded. Because she likes to stir trouble. He stepped closer, his voice low but hard. Rhea, whatever she told you, it's half the story, and you don't need the rest. What you need is to stop looking for things that aren't your business. It is my business. She's my sister. She's my daughter, he snapped, louder than I'd ever heard him. Then he caught himself, the anger folding back into a cold, measured tone. And you're my daughter, too. That's all that matters. Everything else is noise. It was gaslighting dressed as reassurance, and he knew it. But the way he looked at me, steady, unblinking, made me realize he'd spent years perfecting this act. He wasn't going to give me the truth willingly, and if I wanted it, I'd have to take it. 2 days later, I asked Maya to meet me at the old park near our school, the one with the chipped green benches and the rusted swings we used to fight over. It was quiet there, the air heavy with the scent of damp grass. She arrived in a yellow sweater, her hair pulled back, smiling in that open, uncomplicated way she always had. I didn't smile back. I need to show you something, I said, pulling the envelope from my bag. I handed her the photographs first. She took her time with them, flipping each one over as though there might be an explanation scribbled on the back. This one, I said, pointing to the hospital photo. That woman isn't Mom. Her eyes flicked up to mine, just for a second. Then she looked away. Maya. Who is she? She didn't answer. Instead, she unfolded the letter and read it. Her hands trembled. Not much, but enough for me to see. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. I know who she is. She's my mother. The words were so calm they almost didn't register. So you knew? I found out when I was 16, she said, staring at the grass. Dad told me after a fight. He said Rima couldn't take care of me, that I was better off here. That's why my birthday is different. He didn't want people asking questions. And you didn't think to tell me? She looked up then, and there was something raw in her expression. Something that almost looked like shame. Rhea, I didn't want you to feel like you didn't belong. You already felt like the outsider sometimes. I didn't want to make it worse. I laughed then, but it wasn't kind. You mean you didn't want to risk losing your place as the golden child? Because if people knew, maybe they'd look at you differently. That's not fair, she said quickly. I was protecting you, and myself. We were kids. What would you have done with that truth? The bench felt cold beneath me. I would have had the choice to know who I really was. And you took that from me. She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. I didn't want excuses. I didn't want another version of my father's "for your own good" speech. I stood up. The park around us was still, the swing chains creaking faintly in the breeze. She kept talking, about love, about family being more than blood, but her voice felt far away. I walked into silence, not because I forgave her, not because I was ready to cut her out, but because in that moment I realized the truth had already rewritten us. We could never go back to being the sisters we'd been in my memory. That bond had been built on a foundation that wasn't mine. As I left, I didn't look back. The yellow of her sweater was still bright in my peripheral vision, but it felt like a color from someone else's story. That night, I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, tracing the hairline cracks in the plaster like constellations. The house was silent, but it was the kind of silence that hummed, full of words unsaid, truths half buried. In the stillness, I thought about what Maya had said, that she'd kept the truth to protect me. It was almost laughable. How the same lie could be dressed in the robes of love and in the armor of self-preservation. I thought about my father, about the decades he'd spent crafting a version of our family that fit neatly in a frame, free of questions. Maybe in his mind, this was how love worked, by controlling what someone knew so they could never want more. The envelope was still on my desk, the photographs fanned out like fragments of a dream I'd woken from too late. I could burn them. I could confront him again. I could tell the extended family and watch the carefully built walls crumble. Or I could do nothing. The truth had already changed me. That was irreversible. But whether it needed to change anyone else, that was still mine to decide. In the end, I placed the envelope in the back of my closet, behind a box of old winter clothes. Not as a surrender, but as a marker. A reminder that even the closest bonds can be built on borrowed ground. Was it betrayal? Or just how love looks in their language? Messy, possessive, stitched together from choices they thought would save us? I don't know, but I do know this. Some silences are not empty, they are full. And once you hear what they've been holding, you can never unhear it.